If you haven't already done so, there are copies of our agenda on either side of the room on the conveniently assembled shelves. If you would like to follow along with our proceedings tonight, we'd welcome you doing so. There will be multiple opportunities for public comment with respect to the items that are on tonight's agenda, as well as a section that is reserved under item 4 for public comments of a general nature with respect to items that are not on tonight's agenda. At that point in time, if anyone has any questions or comments about things that are not on tonight's agenda, the protocol is to please come down to the podium, let us know who you are, and we would welcome hearing from you. It is our proud custom to begin our meetings by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance, so at this point I would like to ask everyone present to please rise and join us in reciting the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. I'd now like to ask our fine village clerk, April Holden, to please call the roll.
Commissioner Wallace?
Here.
Commissioner Earl?
Here.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Here.
Commissioner White?
Here.
Commissioner Jose?
Here.
Commissioner Barnett?
Here.
Mayor Tully?
Here. Thank you very much. That brings us to item 3, minutes of prior council meetings that are up for approval. We have 2 sets of minutes tonight. First, our executive session minutes for approval only from April 11th, 2017, and second, our regular council meeting minutes from May 2nd, 2017. If there are no changes, corrections, or comments, I will entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Mayor Tully, I move that this council approve the executive session minutes from April 11th, 2017, and the council minutes from May 2nd, 2017, as presented.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Thank you very much. Just felt like a roll call. Brings us to item 4, public comments of a general nature. Again, as mentioned, this is the opportunity for members of the public to ask questions or make comments of a general nature with respect to things that are not on tonight's agenda. And if anyone has such questions or comments, would like to come down to the podium and do so, that would be fine. I will let folks know that one item that is on our agenda tonight, under our active agenda, the special use request for 7221 Lamont Road to permit an animal boarding facility. I believe we were able to get notice out to most folks that there's been a request to, by the petitioner, a request to defer any action on that until next week at the earliest. We typically will accommodate those requests by petitioners, so it is my anticipation, without putting words in my colleague's mouth, that there will be a motion to table that to a date certain when it comes up, and we will not be discussing it tonight. So in case you came here for that purpose, wanted to let you know so that you could get back and enjoy dinner. But meanwhile, back to our regularly scheduled program. This is public comments of a general nature with respect to things not on tonight's agenda. Good evening, sir. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Rich Cullivaney. I reside at 6825 Camden in Downers Grove. The purpose for me speaking today is Amy and Gaston and I attended a delightful seminar last Thursday night, Alternative Futures, Where Will We Live in 2050? It was a panel of experts talking about what are the trends in development, and certainly was about the city of Chicago and about the suburbs. And the subject happened to be on walkable communities, and they talked about the changes that are going now in increased density, very similar to the suburban changes in sprawl and growth that happened after World War II. So the whole essence of walkability that they brought out was that walkable communities, the people enjoy the fabric, they enjoy surprise social interaction with their neighbors as they can go to stores and restaurants and shops and run into people, and that was sort of the whole essence of it. They made the point that along the elevated lines in Chicago, that where they put in new transit stops, that's where the huge growth is occurring. The point they made about the suburbs, which is really interesting, is that the suburbs will be densifying, and that the walkability to the train station and transit-oriented development is a trend that will continue, and that both baby boomers and millennials are getting to the point where they don't want to shovel snow and they don't want to cut the grass, and they feel that the suburbs that focus on bringing that kind of density to their downtowns and walkable area will be the ones that will thrive. They actually made a point that it's going to be a little bit more difficult to sell some of the remote larger lots because you don't have that same walkability. And the whole idea that people are now willing to abandon at least one of their cars so that they can walk to shops and walk to the train. And the whole concept and idea here is that people are very frustrated by the kinds of commutes they have in the automobile, and that's where walkability and what I think I've noticed about Downers Grove is what we're doing here kind of matches right up. They actually said there will be upzoning near stations. Transit-oriented development is happening. They talked about suburban to suburban rail lines. Probably will have to be new technology in order to do that. But it was a good conference. I think it was worthwhile, and that's why we attended. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Mr. Culvaney. Other questions or comments from members of the audience on general matters, items not on tonight's agenda? Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is, hear me okay? My name is Marvin Shaw. I live at 909 Rob Roy Place in Downers Grove. I have a real short statement concerning the animal boarding facility, which I understand would be out of order in number 6, and that's why I'm up here now. For anyone who came tonight expecting a decision on the proposed animal boarding facility, thank you very much for coming. I apologize we won't get to it tonight, but I know we will very quickly. And I want to thank the mayor and the council for receiving all our emails and communications. We know that we flooded your inbox, and thank you so much. While we're disappointed that we could not proceed this evening, we'll continue on, and our focus will continue to be protecting the welfare of the residents in the vicinity and trying to achieve a win-win. So we'll read the petitioner's revised plan very carefully and get back to you with our thoughts and comments. And I apologize if there are a lot of them or if they're on the weekend. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And just to pick up on that, contrary to some messages that we received, not many, but some, there's no North Korean conspiracy that was involved here by having this deferred. This has happened many times where, particularly in response to requests from either the council or from the public with respect to aspects affecting a special use, is, I wouldn't say it's routine, but it's not uncommon for a petitioner to say, well, hold off, let me take some of this back and see what we can do, and I'll come to you. And I would simply point out to everyone that it's precisely because requests have been made of the petitioner that they asked for that continuance.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I suspect. Or do I have to say allegedly? Just to be legal. Thank you. Any other questions or comments of a general nature with respect to items not on tonight's agenda? All right, very good. Well, I appreciate the comments that we did here. We'll move on to our consent agenda, which is item 5. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
Mayor Tully, I move that this council approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Any questions or comments from any members of the audience with respect to any items on tonight's consent agenda? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl? Aye. Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Consent agenda passes unanimously, and it brings us to item 6, which is one item on tonight's agenda, item 6A, ordinance 2017-7340, an ordinance authorizing a special use for 722 Lamont Road to permit an animal boarding facility. Do I have a motion to table that item to date certain, being May 16, 2017?
Mayor Tully, I move that this council postpone consideration of this agenda item until May 16th, 2017.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. The motion passes. The item is tabled until next week. That brings us to the end of our active agenda and to item 7, our first reading or our workshop agenda. This is where items are presented for consideration and discussion purposes only. No vote or final action will be taken at this time. Typically, we ask for village staff or any petitioners to present the item to us. Then the village council this time will ask any questions or comments, and then we'll open it up for questions or comments from the audience. So with that, I will turn over the 4 items on tonight's first reading agenda to our village manager, David Fieldman, for presentment either individually or vicariously.
Thank you, Mayor Tully. I will start by presenting vicariously through our stormwater administrator, Carrie Bear, who will present an ordinance granting a stormwater variance for the property at 4710 Highland Avenue. Carrie.
Good evening, Ms. Bear. Welcome.
Good evening, thank you. Okay, the property that we're talking about tonight is located at 4710 Highland Avenue. It is located just south of Lincoln Street on the west side of Highland Avenue. Forward. This is a zoomed-in view of it, showing what it looks like on our drainage map. The blue area is what we call the localized poor depressional areas, or the LPDAs, localized poor drainage areas, LPDAs. Click on that once more. This is the house that we're talking about. Right now, you can see almost the entire property is located in that LPDA. There's an existing home on it and an existing detached garage that is located approximately here. If you go to the next slide. This is a screenshot of what it looks like if you're standing on the sidewalk. The house that we're talking about is the one on the right, the brick one. You can see the existing detached garage that's in the back part of the house. You can see the shared driveway that exists with the neighbor. And this is just a zoomed-in view showing what the existing detached garage looks like. Right now, the homeowner is asking for a variance from the Stormwater and Floodplain Ordinance, Section 26505B, which requires detached garages to be constructed at least 1 foot above the base flood elevation. This existing garage is about 2.3 feet below the base flood elevation. The garage that they're proposing to be built would be about 1.8 feet below the base flood. Constructing the new garage to our current code requirements would obviously be very difficult because of the shared driveway. In order to get the grade to go, you'd end up with about a 3-foot difference between the two. Excuse me. There's not even enough room for the house on the south side of them to have the required 10 feet driveway. So there's really a lot of different constraints out there that make it quite difficult to get the requirements. Because of this, there was a public hearing that was held on April 13th at the Stormwater and Floodplain Oversight Committee meeting. There, the committee recommended to approve the variance. They did have a couple of conditions. One of them was to place a sign in the garage stating hazardous materials will not be allowed to be stored below the BFE, and that they would have to record a note to title indicating to any future property owner that the garage was susceptible to flooding. So this was similar to the other variance that was heard a couple of months ago on 63rd Street.
And we'll be happy to answer any questions that the council may have tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Questions or comments from members of the council? I couldn't let you leave without asking a couple questions. If you don't mind, just for
Yes.
clarification.
Sure.
It's currently significantly below the flood elevation.
Correct.
So if it floods, it's been flooding for a long time.
Correct.
And it will continue to flood, maybe less, but it will still
A
flood.
little bit less. Anything that is below that flooding elevation needs to be constructed with certain materials that aren't going to be prone to flood damage. They're going to do flow-through vents underneath it to try and minimize the amount of comp storage. The big thing that we look for when any permit is coming in is that they're not going to make flooding worse for any of the neighbors. So they're going to make sure they have to comp for any of that storage. So basically, if you think of it like a bathtub, since they're going to have to bring some fill in, they need to excavate other places on the property. So we make sure to maintain that water level back there. And so they are going to allow that water to stay at the same elevation it did. It will be able to flow in and out through portions of the garage. But again, they won't be able to store any hazardous materials below that. And they will make sure it's all constructed of materials that can handle the water.
Thank you. And then second, as you mentioned, there are a couple of conditions that will be added that don't currently exist. So in some respects, improving the situation both for the current owners as well as future landowners.
Correct.
And then third, just to clarify, the hardship that's created, or for the reason for the inability to meet the stormwater ordinance is dictated by the topography and by the conditions on the site, not anything that the petitioner wants to do.
Correct.
Thank you for the clarification. Any other questions or comments from members of the council?
Very briefly, having looked at the totality of this, as of right now, I have no problem supporting this moving forward.
Questions or comments from members of the audience? If you could please come down to the podium, only because we're televising this and no one will hear you, and they would be very disappointed not to hear your question. You sure? If it's a matter of convenience, if you like, you can try to tell it to me and then I'll ask it. Well, I don't want this to become a habit because I could be here all night.
I'm just going to guess if it's already flooded.
Yes,
The homeowner is here and can probably answer that.
if you would like. Yeah. And again, if you could please come down to the podium only because we are being broadcast live and folks, and recorded. Good evening, welcome.
Yeah, hi everybody. Matt Forsley. I'm my wife and I are the current owners of 4710. It is not currently flooding, but it also doesn't have an existing floor. So there is no, I can't tell you if it's flood. There's never been water that's made it all the way up to the garage, but it can't retain water either. It's completely not usable, and you can kind of see from the picture, it's sunken down to the left and a little worried about it falling over, so.
I'm glad you said that. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments from members of the audience? All right, hearing none. Next item, please.
Next item is item B, an ordinance amending water rates. Simply put, this ordinance would increase the Village of Downers Grove water rates for all customers by 1.1%. This increase would cover the cost that the village pays of purchasing water directly from the DuPage Water Commission, which supplies all of our water. So a 1.1% increase, and we're happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Thank you. Questions or comments from members of the council? Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you, Mayor. As mentioned, I'd previously questioned about the expected increase in the meter rates for next year when we consider our new budget. And just wondering if there was, and I'd ask my fellow council members to think about it. We're increasing water rates now because it's strictly a pass-through from the City of Chicago DuPage Water Commission, and that's something we normally do, and we're doing it mid-year. And since there seems to be a increase in the meter rate coming up in a few months, that maybe we should do it all at one time and avoid bringing this up in the budget discussions when we do the new budgets. So, and what the new meter rates would be if we did it now rather than wait, rather than keep hitting multiple times, just do it all at once and be done with it.
What's the other one is about twice what this is? If you recall, I don't have that in front of me. If so, I can see the headline screaming now, Waldeck doubles water rates.
Yeah. Well, it's
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, you're going to do it. Do you keep doing it
Right.
in bits and bytes, or do we do it and get it over with? So just something to consider.
Fair question. Thank you. Commissioner Barnett.
Two questions. One is, it sounds like this is anticipating an increase that hasn't really happened yet. Is that correct?
That's how DuPage Water Commission described it. However, it is happening to us and all the other purchasers of water from DuPage Water Commission. That is a real increase.
Why the differential between the 167 and the 11?
Because the purchase of water represents only one portion of our costs.
Yeah.
It's a large portion, but the other costs we had budgeted not to have an increase this year per our plan, and so we didn't want to bump up the other rates unless it was
Gotcha.
pursuant to a plan.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Other questions from the council? Questions from members of the audience? Hearing none, next item, please.
The next item is a resolution granting historic landmark designation for the property at 4709 Linscott, and as you could guess, all of these are presented by our Community Development Director, Stan Popovich.
Otherwise known as Mr. Landmark. Good evening.
Thank you, Mayor Tully. That's a new one. I've never heard that one before. So, as Manager Fielman noted, this was a request for a historic landmark at 4709 Linscott Avenue. The property is located slightly northwest of downtown here at Linscott in Chicago. Here it is outlined. It's two houses south of Chicago. It's on one of the brick streets here in town. I do have an older picture of the home at Linscott. We were not able to ascertain the date of this, but you can see it's a folk Victorian. It's got a wraparound porch in its heyday, and it's got verge board along at the gable ends there, along with some fish scale siding, and then the balcony here at the corner as well. Current day condition of the home, again, the front porch was enclosed, but you can see the characteristics of the folk Victorian coming through the gable ends there, as well. The balcony remains, and then on this picture, you can see a little bit better the verge board above the bay window there on the gable end, along with the fish scale siding there. It's a little hard to see in this image, but in the packet, it comes up a little bit better. So we find that it meets a landmark criteria. It was built in 1894, and it meets the second criteria of being a good example of a folk Victorian home. So staff recommends making this a landmark, and if there's any questions, I can answer those for you.
Thank you. This would be number 13?
I
14
believe that's
since the new ordinance?
I believe that's correct. We have so many of them now. When I do presentations, I have to start writing them down. Before I could just remember what the houses were, but now I have to start writing them down. So
It's a good problem
very
to have.
exciting. It
Good
is a very
problem
good
to have.
problem to have.
Questions from the council? The one thing I will say is I want to thank the homeowner, Ms. Lockerbie, for bringing this forward. Thank you very much. We're very grateful for all the residents that voluntarily bring forth their homes for landmarking in the new ordinance. As mentioned a moment ago, we have quite a few that are coming forward, which is truly a wonderful development and part of the trifecta of elevating, educating, and celebrating historic people, places, and things in our community. So thank you very much for doing that. Any questions from members of the audience? So Commissioner Earl first.
Yeah, it just dawned on me, we usually have a name for these houses. Does this one have a name? Just curious.
I believe this is going to be the Lottie McDougal house.
Okay, thank you.
It's got a really good ring to it. Questions from the audience? Mr. Colavani, welcome back.
Thank you. It's still at 6825 Camden, unless they move because I'm here so often, which is feasible. I just wanted to thank Mary Lou Lockerbie. This is very gratifying because she attended the November 12th How to Landmark event where Stan Popovich spoke, I spoke, Amy Gaston from the Historical Society. So it was great to get a follow-up call. He had some questions. We got Amy on the phone, we had a discussion, and then Mary Lou invited us into her house. We got a chance to tour it. She asked for some help with the application. And the point I wanted to make publicly is, first of all, these people are heroes who are protecting their houses for the next generations. And secondly, just to let people know that they don't really have to know anything about how to do this, and they can seek out help. There's certainly a lot of people, in addition to myself and Amy, that would be more than willing to help people out in this regard. So if there's an interest, we'd be more than willing. Staff has been delightful to work with, great communication, great cooperation there. So this is just a really good event, and obviously speaking in support of this. And I know it's not public comments now, but I also would like to remind people that there is a new video, and perhaps you might even mention something about it later.
I very well may.
Then I won't say any more.
You mean the one that's on the front page of the village website?
Whatever. Thank you very much.
Left side? Thank you. And while Ms. Gaston is coming up to the podium, someone who needs no introduction, I'll also thank on behalf of the council all the volunteers, the Friends of the Edwards House and others that have assisted those who are interested in landmarking with the process and with the research that goes into it. That's very much appreciated. Good evening.
Good evening. Amy Gasson, 5320 Benton Avenue. The most difficult part of landmarking your home is making the decision to do it. I want to thank Ms. Lockerbie for making the decision to protect her home for the future and going through the application process. And then on behalf of the Historical Society, I just want to express our support and excitement for this application, and just note that this was a centennial home, which was the former plaquing program through the Historical Society, which is now known as the Historic Home Program. So it's always nice to see how these two programs work together complementarily. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you sharing that. Other questions or comments from members of the audience? Hearing none. Next and last item, please.
This item is informational, and it's a couple of introductory comments about updates to our building and fire code that will take place very shortly. Here to introduce this item is Stan Popovich.
Welcome back.
Good evening again. I'll put on my building code hat here. So when anybody applies for a building permit or in the village, they have to follow these set of codes depending on what their permit application is. You can see we have currently operate under a 2006 International Code Council set of codes. The Code Council updates these codes every 3 years, so it's a cycle of 09, 12, and 15. They're currently working on 18. Staff is proposing to update our codes here in red to the 2015 set of codes. You'll see some below that have been updated already through state mandates. It's important to update building codes as technology changes, improvements are made to the codes. They take a look at old codes and see where there's been some discrepancies or some items that are a little bit questionable or cause some confusion and clarify those. Updated codes also allow us to get a better ISO score and a better community rating system score as well. So these will help us have a good score for those items as well. Moving forward, we're proposing this schedule. To move forward, we're going to host an open house here on May 24th in the morning for builders and contractors and architects to talk about some of the code changes and the significant changes. And we're planning on bringing it back to the Village Council in June and hopefully have adoption in July for an August effective date of our building codes. If there's any questions at this time, I'd be happy to answer those for you.
Excellent, thank you very much. Questions, comments from the council? Questions or comments from members of the audience? Very good, thank you.
Obviously, more to come on that item. Look forward to that open house in May. That ends our first reading tonight, Mayor.
Terrific, thank you very much. That brings us to item 8, the mayor's report. I have several items I'd like to report out on. First of all, I just want to remind everyone that this Saturday, May 13th, is the 28th annual Groovin' in the Grove 5K race and Little Groovers races. The 5K begins at 9 o'clock on Saturday, May 13th. And while online registration is closed, you can still register race day. And the Little Groovers races start a little bit later and continue out throughout the day. It is, of course, located on the campus, mostly, of our very own Midwestern University, located at 555 31st Street in beautiful Downers Grove. It is a nice course and one of my favorites because coming as it does the day before Mother's Day, at the finish line, they have a tradition of handing all the moms who cross the finish line a flower, which is really nice. So great race in our community, and those who are interested can still attend. I may see you there, way in the back of the field. And next, wanted to congratulate and thank both the Friends of the Edwards House and the Downers Grove Historical Society on a wonderful Founders Day weekend that on Saturday included the dedication of the Underground Railroad plaque at the Downers Grove Cemetery here in our downtown, as well as recognition of Israel Blodgett as Founder of the Year for Founders Day. Followed on Sunday by a joint commemoration of the Fairview Avenue train station by both Downers Grove Historical Society and the Village of Downers Grove. Recognizing both that as a historic place, but also a landmark under the village's ordinance. It was a very nice ceremony that took place there. Commissioners Wallace and Earl and Jose joined me there for that ceremony. And we learned a lot of things about that train station we didn't know. One thing I didn't know is that until the late 70s, the station agent actually lived above the station and sold cookies and things out of there. How very quaint. So there's an upstairs that could have a historic purpose in the future. Who knows? More creative things have happened. And also want to mention, as was hinted at very strongly earlier, that as previously declared, May is, of course, Historic Preservation Month in the Village of Downers Grove. And one of the things that we're doing in addition to Founders Day celebrations is there is a rockin' new video on the Village's website under the May is Historic Preservation Month and celebrating the process and the various people, places, and things that have been landmarked or has been designated as historic sites, featuring our very own Stan Mr. Landmarks Popovich. So if you get a chance to check out that video, it is on the homepage of the Village website, which is, of course, www.downers.us. And I think that is all I have, other than I just want to wish all the mothers in Downers Grove a very wonderful Mother's Day this weekend. And that ends my report. And I will go now to item 9, which is our village attorney's report. Ms. Petrarca, happy Mother's Day.
Thank you, Mayor. 2 items to present this evening. The first is an ordinance granting a stormwater variance for 4710 Highland Avenue, and the other is an ordinance amending water rates, both of which will be on next week's active agenda. Thank you, Mayor. That is all.
Great, thank you very much. Brings us to item 10, council member reports. This is an opportunity for members of the Village Council to either share items of interest or other goings-on in the community with those in the audience and those watching at home, or reporting out on anything they might want to share with the rest of the council from their liaison roles. So we'll start with Commissioner Barnett today.
I have no report, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Jose.
No report, Mayor. Thank you.
Commissioner Earl.
Just want to thank Friends of the Edwards House and the Historical Society for a very informative talk on how to landmark your historic home. It was fascinating. So thank you, Amy and Rich, who, along with Stan, were there, and Stan, who gave his day off up to come and speak with us. So I appreciate everybody's hard work on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Waldeck.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a reminder, May 19th starts the classic car shows. Check the downtown management website for rules about parking, et cetera, but it'll be an exciting season for the car shows. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Commissioner Wallace.
Real quick, Mayor, I registered today for Noah's Hope Cupcake Classic 5K. If you are interested in running that event, it is Sunday, May 21st, 2017. You can actually run or walk, and you can register at www.noahshope.com/cupcake. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner White.
Yes, I have one item to report. Last week, Commissioner Earl and myself, along with our state representative, David Olson, attended a recognition dinner held by DG Fish. And DG Fish, for those who may not know, has been around for many decades, I think going on 50 years. And they have volunteers that help the community. First, and probably the most high-profile thing you do is the food pantry. But DG Fish also gets driver volunteers who help people get to doctor's appointments or schools or various things like that. Driver volunteers are very important. And they also have a phone banking, a phone contact system to keep in touch with people. I'll give a little more information about how to contact them. They're a type of organization that really does help bind the community together. It serves Downers Grove and the surrounding areas, Darien, Woodridge, places like that. The number of volunteers who came for their dinner was really quite remarkable, and the stories were great. Something that's important immediately, this Saturday on May 13th is the 25th annual food drive. The postal people pick up food and will donate it. What they told us is that donations of food are very much welcome. What's much more welcome are volunteers to go to the fish pantry on Saturday and help them unload the food, because they will have massive quantities of food. If anybody has a high school student who's strong and able, that would be wonderful. Anything to help them move that. You can contact it at dgfish.org, and there's a phone number, 630-964-7776. So if you have some time this weekend, donate food, or more importantly, help them stock the food that's donated by others. Thank you, that's all.
Thank you, Commissioner. And two very quick things before we recess into the committee room to pick up two items that we ran out of time to discuss last week. Number one being the 2017 long-range plan, and number two, updating the village's comprehensive plan, which we'll be discussing next door in the committee room. So what we're going to do is we're going to recess into that room and start that meeting up shortly. Two quick things. Number one, happy Mother's Day to both Commissioner Wallace and Commissioner Earl. And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that there are exactly 43 days, 4 hours, 25 minutes, and 11 seconds until Rotary Grove Fest returns to the streets of Downers Grove. And with that, I will ask for a motion to recess into the committee room to pick up on the items that I just mentioned.
Mayor Tully, I move that this council recess to the committee room for the items on the agenda.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner White?
Aye.
Commissioner Waldeck?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Barnett?
Aye.
Mayor Tully?
Aye. Thank you very much. We are recessed to the committee room to discuss those two items. Thank you for attending and watching. Good night. Discussion that we identified in the other room with respect to the long-range plan and the continuing conversation of our comprehensive plan. For some reason, the opening theme to Gilligan's Island comes into mind whenever I talk about the comprehensive plan. It's a 3-hour tour that's gone on for 3 months. To introduce the both items, I think we're going to be starting with Mr. Baker.
I'll actually be introduced in the first slide and then turn it over to...
And then running for the door?
Yes.
Very good. All right.
I'm teaming with Stan Popovich for the community. For the
Thank you, Mr.
plan
Baker.
discussion. All right. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council, members of the community. Tonight we'll be continuing our discussion of long-range planning with specific focus related to the future of the downtown. Just to remind everybody, long-range planning combines elements of strategic planning and long-range financial planning. We've been doing it for many, many years now. Found it to be an effective process. for discussion and decision-making. This is our, we call our flight analogy. The goal is to try to keep the level of conversation up at the 30 to 40,000 foot level. Be thinking a little more broadly and long-term. Just a timeline, if you recall, we began our long-range plan conversations this year back in February, and continuing them, we'll continue them through the month of June. The goals have remained largely the same for the past several years. You can see those stated here. I won't read through all of them. And the issues that we've focused on as part of this long-range planning process are listed on the screen. OPEB, otherwise known as other post-employment benefits. General fund sustainability, those two have already been discussed. Tonight, the focus is really on planning for the future of the downtown. All right, so here we go. And before we talk about the downtown and its future, I think there's really some good reason to go back and think about the past. And I'd like everybody to start out by thinking about this question. Where were you in 1997? Where did you live at the time? What were you doing? Do you remember any specific events from your life during that particular year? Because it's a significant year for the Village of Downers Grove. First, I will show you a few culturally significant photos from that time period. Let you absorb a few of those. That'll help take you back a little bit. Some should look very recognizable. Yes, this is a picture of the Spice Girls standing next to Prince Charles and Nelson Mandela. That is correct. Carlton Fisk's number was retired by the White Sox in 1997. Steve Jobs was named interim CEO of Apple that year. Fairly good decision by that company. And Venus Williams, at 17 years old, lost the U.S. Open to Martina Hingis. So, just to refresh your memory of some of the things going on in 1997. Now I'm going to show you a few images of downtown Downers Grove as it existed at that time. Obviously, none of these are recognizable now.
Yeah, that was a mall, all right. Oh, boy.
So you can see a lot different than the way the village looks now. So the reason that 1997 has such significance is that's the year that the village really began undertaking, in a significant degree, planning for the future of the downtown. 20 years ago this year, it began.
I was going to interrupt and say, Rich, there wasn't a whole lot to walk to with the downtown back then, was it?
So in January of '97, the village adopted the master plan for the downtown area. You can see a direct quote that comes from that master plan document. It speaks to the concerns of not taking action to make improvements in the downtown. Later that year, the village would create the special service area that became the funding source for the Downtown Management Corporation and establish the Downtown TIF District, which was the funding source for a significant amount of public and private redevelopment that occurred within the downtown. And here you can see a lot of that those public improvements in these pictures. So massive reconstruction of all the public streets within the downtown area.
You've got to tell the story about the clay tile.
I think you're probably better equipped to do that.
Oh, all right. That's Mike's polite way of telling me that I'm much older. So there's a famous story about when the downtown was ripped up for this massive infrastructure project that had to be done, which you can see here, that there was a piece of tile that was pulled up. I think it was stamped. It was a clay tile that was stamped
Over 100 years old.
It was over a 100-year tile. That was the infrastructure that was running through the downtown, under the streets. Clay tiles from the mid to late 1800s.
You should have landmarked that.
All yours. Where do you want to move?
This period, very shortly after the creation of the TIF district, obviously included a lot of infrastructure improvement, Also, the construction of the parking deck. Here's, you can see the excavation of the, what's now the area that serves as stormwater detention below the parking deck, and of course, the construction of the parking facility as well. And it was after this that really a lot of the private redevelopment began. So what I'm going to show you now are about 24 pictures. I'll just go through them fairly quickly. But they show the downtown in its current condition. Not just new construction and new development, but also a number of the existing buildings, buildings that have been there for decades, if not more than a century, along with some pictures that show a variety of ways that people use the downtown. Certainly not all of them, but we didn't want to lose the opportunity to show the people in the downtown and how it's experienced. And some pictures of the projects that are under construction, and renderings of two that have just gotten underway in the last several months. And so what this represents really is a downtown that looks considerably different than the pictures from 1997. We created a map that provides some illustration. In yellow, all the infrastructure that was completely reconstructed shortly after the creation of the TIF district, and then the properties shaded in blue represent the redevelopment that has occurred over that period of time in the downtown. And obviously, it's still occurring today. From a by the numbers perspective, you can see here, again, a significant amount of change represented in the number of residential units, increase of 88.5%, commercial space up 70%, public parking spaces increased by 60%, private by 52%. The EAV, so the value of property within the downtown area over the 20-year period of time, from 16.1 to $54.5 million, 238% increase. Just by comparison, the overall EAV in the village went from just over 1.1 million to 2.1 million. And what was represented in a lot of those pictures that you saw was a public investment of about $46.5 million, and that really helped spur a private investment of $89.3 million. So the reason for sharing that information really is to provide kind of a foundation for the introduction of this issue. It has been 20 years. The life of the TIF district is 23 years, and the SSA is due to expire at the same time that the TIF is. And yet there are still a number of needs that persist and require attention in the downtown. You can see them listed here: parking, infrastructure maintenance, marketing, attraction, retention, continued facilitation of redevelopment opportunities, events coordination, and a number of services that are unique to the downtown. And yet, with the coming expiration in the next 3 years of the TIF and the SSA, the primary funding sources that we've relied on for the last few decades will go away unless something is created to take their place. And that really is what's proposed in terms of action is a process that spans the next year and a half, where we work to create a plan to address the future needs of the downtown that features extensive engagement with key stakeholders such as the Downtown Management Corporation, business and property owners, and residents in the community at large, along with a reliance on guidance that's provided from a number of the village's planning documents. Obviously, one we'll be discussing this evening, the comprehensive plan, along with other planning and regulatory documents at the village's disposal. And here are some of the key questions that are envisioned to be discussed and hopefully answered through this process. Future needs of the downtown, what are they? How should they be prioritized? How should they be paid for? What role should the Downtown Management Corporation play in future years? How should it be funded? How should the comprehensive plan recommendations be achieved? All very interrelated questions as we think about the next 20 years and beyond of downtown Downers Grove. So that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions. And Mayor, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. As always, excellent presentation with lots to think about and lots to kind of want to go back and take a look at some of those pictures and let them soak in. So in 1997, I had just made partner at my first law firm, had been living in Downers Grove for 5 years in Orchard Brook, and only had one kid at the time. And I told a story that I used to work late nights, take the train home, because this is before you could telecommute, so you had to work in the office. To come home and the cab drivers would be around the train station to take me to Orchard Brook on inclement weather because it was really nice, I'd actually walk. But the joke that the cab drivers used to always say was that the nickname for downtown Downers Grove was Downers Grave because it was dead after 6 o'clock and there was nothing going on. Years later, I remember when we got recognized by the Chicago Tribune, one of the top 10 downtowns in the western suburbs. So obviously, there's been a lot of change, and improvements are always in the eye of the beholder. But hopefully, it's been very positive, and we have things to actually walk to in the downtown now. So yeah, those are all, from my perspective, these are all important questions with the expiration of the TIF, and particularly the expiration of the special service area that is the funding source for a lot of these activities, and also the change in dynamics in the downtown, because it used to be that there were, Commissioner Waldeck, you'll recall this, the majority of the Downtown Management Board was all businesses and landlords, because that's who owned all the property in the downtown. Nobody lived downtown. And now the number of people who actually live downtown, who are residents, not landlords or business owners, dwarf the number of businesses. So there's been a demographic change in the downtown. There have been shifts in terms of what people are looking for and what trends are in terms of automobile use and some of the other things that were mentioned earlier tonight. Downtown has always been viewed both physically and emotionally as the heart of the community, and I suspect will be for many, many, many years after we're all gone from this table. So if you're looking for my opinion on whether this should be a top priority in terms of having a plan for when these things expire, not reacting but being proactive, I wholeheartedly say yes. But open to other views.
You can buy shoes.
Yes. Well, I bought my Letterman jacket at Ram Sports.
And groceries.
Yes.
Well, premium.
Gishi shoes.
Walgreens. Sure. And I remember Judy and I were walking down the street in the evening, and a car pulled up with some young folks, and whatever they were calling millennials then, I can't remember. Anyway, they said, "Where can you get a drink in here?" And I couldn't think of one bar anywhere. You couldn't get a drink, plus the fact that our rules, our council rules, were if you want a liquor license, you had to serve food. Matter of fact, your main course was food, and alcohol was adjunct to the service of food. Things have changed. And on that downer.
Well, I think 1997, former Commissioner Olson wasn't even born yet, was he?
Could be, yeah.
Well, with that, really what we were looking for here, if you recall, we've just been identifying the top 3 major issues that face us and affecting our future, and looking for council concurrence that these should be the 3 issues that we focus on moving forward. Clearly, one of our top priority issues for the last 20 years and probably for the next 20. So unless there's any objection from the council, we'll consider this direction to keep moving forward on this and make it a top priority so that when these 2 items expire, we'll have a plan in place.
Could you go back to the slide comparing 97 to that one? Yeah. The number of units are including the current construction. So that's the additional, what, 400?
Yeah, that includes the 5100 Forest Building, Marquis on Maple, and the Main and Maple
So
project.
about 300-ish. Okay, thanks. So just that little bit is considerable. Those new units. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, as long as you got that slide up, I meant to say it earlier, but I'm really happy about that public-private investment ratio. It's almost two private dollars to every $1 put in. That's really helped bring a lot of outside money into our downtown to improve it. When you think of there's some communities that don't have downtowns and have spent an enormous amount of money to create one whole cloth, we're very fortunate to have one and continue to invest in it and maintain it, I think is critical.
And I think the other thing to note is in having lived here in 1997, and the perceived amount of parking back then was vast because they were just big open lots and all people could see was parking. But right now we've got considerably more, and I don't think that people appreciate the fact that there's definitely more parking than there used to be.
Right.
Still maybe not enough, but definitely more than we had. So.
Is that slide in the materials anywhere? I don't remember seeing it before this evening.
I think it's we had a bus system.
I'd like to have it available.
We can certainly provide it, make it available publicly.
In a way, we still do.
Yeah.
My opinion is that resolving these issues isn't just high priority, it's just essential. It's not really discretionary. We have to address these issues, period.
So, translation, these go to 11.
Well, it's part of the whole, what's the future of downtown? And all this, and it's actually interesting with the comprehensive plan and other initiatives, various things are all coming together at one time where we can plan for the downtown for the next 20 years. So what will it be in 2037?
I can't pass up the opportunity to go from a Spinal Tap reference to a great segue into comprehensive planning. So I think with that, if the council is okay, we can actually move on to Stan's presentation about the comprehensive plan, where we'll need a little bit more work from the council because we're actually looking for some direction on some very important issues here tonight. Stan,
Thanks, Mike. Yep. Thanks, Dave. Hello again, Stan.
Long time no see, Mayor.
Have you ever gotten landmarks since we last saw you?
I have no landmarks tonight. I had those earlier, so I'm very excited to bring those in, and very excited to talk about the comp plan tonight, too. I asked Doug if I could get the business cards, so we'll be working on those. I have a new nickname, and I appreciate your humor on that, because I'm sure I will get an earful.
I think you're going to get a purple sequin jacket because anyone who would call Mr. Landmarks.
I know, I'm really worried about that, so. So we'll move on to the discussion about the downtown focus area plan within the comprehensive plan. I'm going to take us way back before the Cubs won the World Series in 2016, not as far back as Mike did. But just to go over some of where we've been and how we've gotten to where we are. So as you remember, in March and April of last year, we developed the comp plan committee. Their goal was to look at the comprehensive plan, provide recommendations to you, and then go ahead and start looking at downtown development regulations as well. So in
So they started, I have three section shows, comp plan committee, plan commission, and village council, to sort of see the steps that we've taken and how I've gone through the process so far. So the comp plan committee started looking at the downtown focus area in May and June of last year because they wanted to get that started first so that we could talk about it at the council level, take it back to them, and incorporate it into the comprehensive plan. So at that time, the comp plan committee developed this map for downtown, which split the downtown into three areas. The core is in this green area, the edges in the purple, and then the transition area was in the yellow. So at their June meeting, they recommended this plan up to the Plan Commission. In late June, the Plan Commission held a meeting, and they modified this plan a little bit, and they came up with a fourth area called the center, which is this darker green here, keeping some splotches of the core, the edge, and then the transition as well. So there was a little bit of a change from the Comp Plan Committee to the Plan Commission. In July, we brought these before the council at that time and said, okay, here are the differences. Let's have another discussion here before the council to see where we go and how we develop this plan. At that time, at that meeting, we didn't get complete concurrence from everybody, and we were just wanted some more direction. And we thought the best way to achieve that was to hold individual meetings with council members and to do a visual preference survey. So Doug and his team GoPro downtown, and if you remember, we all watched videos of downtown going down each street and picking out certain landmarks that were there and certain properties. And so out of that, we developed, these are sort of my handwritten notes on some of these about what people individually thought. We consolidated those into one map. In October, we came before the board again here in this room, and we had developed this map. So the core, and this burnt orange or red here, was pretty well defined by all the council members. This was what we thought the core was. The edge was again similarly defined. We found one area just west of the senior living facility on Gilbert Street that we thought should go back to single-family residential. And then we found our transition areas here in the browns scattered about. There were 6 areas, if you remember, that we had some questions about. So they were up here on Franklin Street, on Forest in Maine, Rogers, just north of where we are today, and then south side of Maple, and then the west side of Main Street, south of Grove between Maple. We talked about what the council desired in these areas. And so we came to some consensus that evening at that time about the plan. And so then our consultant, Halsey Levine, put the plan into a prettier picture for us and presented it back to the Comp Plan Committee. These are the functional sub-areas that we have. So at that time in November, the subcommittee, the Comp Plan Committee, forwarded a recommendation to the Plan Commission. The Plan Commission took 2 meetings in December and January, again, looking at the map and concurred with the map, and then forwarded on the recommendation to you. You'll recall the Plan Commission made some changes to the text of the downtown focus area plan, but not necessarily the mapping behind the downtown focus area plan. So in February and March, we started our discussions with you. Concurrently at that time, because the Comp Plan Committee was charged with also working on development regulations, we switched, you'll see the fancy title changing here, we switched to downtown zoning regulations. And so they looked at downtown zoning regulations. So how would we implement this? What did the plan mean when it said setbacks should be similar to larger area green space? So what was that setback? Height should be about this much. We said lower buildings in the core. Well, what should that height be? What's a decent height, or how many stories? So they looked at it, and then at that meeting, we had residents come out, and property owners, specifically asking questions about this area at Franklin and Main Street here. And so that sort of had some questions there, but again, at those meetings, we said it's a comprehensive plan question, and it's up to the council. And so again, then in our April meeting, if we jump forward to April there, again, before this board, we had some discussions about this area at a couple of meetings, and then ultimately at the last meeting, it was a consensus, we believe, to change this area on the west side of Main between Forest, south of Franklin, to the transition area. So that transition area actually moves over to the west side of Main Street there, that's the edge, my apologies, that's the edge moving over that way, and then transition staying on the east side of Main Street, south of Franklin Street. At this meeting as well, we heard a question mark about what happens behind 922 Warren and behind sort of east of the Tivoli parking lot. So that's another area, if there's some questions about that, we'd like to get some direction on that one. So moving forward to where we are today, also at the last, there's some questions that we have, and we want to get some discussion and some direction from you. So there were some questions about the the existing, this is the 3D model, the SketchUp model in the pattern book that the commissioners were talking about. So we were able to explode this and then go ahead and add some of the new buildings. So we've added 5100 Forest here that you can see. We've added the new 922 up in that area, so we can see that new change. And then there's been significant change at the corner of Main and Maple. So you see the Marquia Maple, the Main and Maple building, and then also the new Spanka down here. We put that in there as well. So we've added these new areas to show the new development and how that's affected the massing model of the downtown here as well. So we've added those things, we're able to do that. Another question that came up were some new potential catalyst sites. So we've labeled these VC 1, 2, 3, and 4. The first one is the Forest North lot, north of Burlington. The second was the library parking lot. There's some questions about including the drive-through there. The third one is on Curtis, between the hospital, or not the hospital, the church, my apologies, and the bank, that parking, that one-story building there, and the drive-through. And again, this corner here at Washington and Maple, I've taken the liberty to extend that all the way to the Marquia Maple as well, those two smaller properties there. So those are some questions about the downtown. And then also there was also provided some comments about the downtown as well. And so some of these comments have been addressed in some of these catalyst site ideas. And then again, those are some comments that we have tonight that we'd like to get some discussion from the village council on. And then this is where we are today. So at this point, I'll turn it back over to the mayor and I can answer any questions or take notes, however you'd like to proceed.
Thank you. Appreciate the presentation. And I noticed conspicuously absent from that prior slide was any date next to adoption.
That's up to your discretion.
I put it out on purpose. Very well. Any questions that anyone has or information that they need? I also want to point out that I know you've been keeping score with the comments. So we've gotten so far. And I forget what I said. Did I ask that to the extent people had any issues with any of these textual comments that we identify that? I forget, because we slipped a little bit. When we set for that as a...
The deadline for submitting any comments, questions, concerns was a couple weeks ago. We did receive a couple of comments from Commissioner White. Those have been incorporated. Basically, what we're down to is on the list of changes. We've tracked them all. We plan to make all of those changes unless council members say, hey, I have a concern about those, and then we'll have a discussion.
Okay. All right, well, you know the rules. Thanks for playing. Who would like to start?
I'd like to go to the downtown focus area plan. Actually, right now, my thinking is that B8, I would not want to focus on that as a catalyst site. I mean, I'm not saying I'm opposed to something happening there, but I don't necessarily think we want planning resources directed at trying to make something happen there. There's other places I think we can make something happen sooner and be more effective. I'll advocate for BCs 1, 2, and 3. And if we go back to if we recall the slide we saw earlier about the change in downtown and the parking areas, I think we think about what Mr. Clavini talked about earlier about the future of downtowns. I don't believe surface parking lots are beneficial to a walkable, viable, vibrant downtown. And I think we need to have adequate parking, but I don't think surface parking lots within the downtown they're actually a very low value use of the land. And I do remember when the property 5100 Forest was being developed, the developer talked about the value of a turning vista, and it's a very powerful image. But in front of it, in the foreground, are two parking lots. And that, in my opinion, detracts from the architectural attractiveness of terminating vista. So now what we do is complicated, and there's a lot of different things, but VC1 and VC2, and I remember very clearly when we did the comprehensive plan in 2010, 2011, filling in the drive-throughs was considered a very valuable step towards a walkable, friendly, a place where people will want to walk around. First of all, there won't be cars coming out of the drive-through to run you over as you're walking down the sidewalk. But there's also room for more storefront. So the store, the businesses want retail next to them. Retail likes to congregate together. So to fill in those, I think, are high priority in my opinion. BC4, we need to have a discussion. Is it the same height as the other two buildings, or is it a step down? I'm not going to venture an opinion tonight. We don't have to. We can. That's not necessarily a comprehensive plan decision. And then I'll comment about my thoughts on B7. I think, again, there's a terminating vista. I believe that should be part of the core, no more than 3 stories. That will allow the upper stories of the marquee on Maple to be seen over top of something there. And we could put something that architecturally would fit very nicely with the rest of downtown, and you have a turning vista along Grove Street. If you go and look at the drawing that was associated with the 2011 comprehensive plan, something like that is there. And that's something that I would want to see at B7. North of Track's a little more complicated. I do see a sign, though, that B2 is under contract, so I don't know if something's coming in on that soon or not. Once Washington Street is eventually as extended as it will be, B4 is a marvelous development site, especially once Washington goes through. I'd like to keep the Masonic Temple as part of, it's not up to me, but my goal, I think that should be an objective.
And then the Masonic Temple, the parking lot of the Masonic Temple.
The parking lot, fill in the parking lot.
The building itself is not identified.
Yeah, the building itself. And then just a very quick comment on the text that was submitted. There's one paragraph I'd like to strike. Just one little paragraph, at least. There's a word contemporary in one of the paragraphs that I'm not sure I want there anymore. So that would be the only change I'd propose.
Which paragraph?
I think I added a little bit in yellow.
I got that. The built form of the downtown edge should be generally consistent with contemporary community.
I don't like the word contemporary anymore. So just take that paragraph out.
Oh, you got it. It's gone out of style.
And I think there was. And if we back up to this slide, the downtown focus area, it might just be a personal preference, but it really helps me visualize in my mind what these things look like. Because I'm looking at this right now, and I can see the turning vista along Grove, and why a low-rise building put right there, very architecturally attractive, would just be a tremendous asset. I see the whole at Washington and Maple, and what we fill in, and what we fill in there is an important decision. And I see how 5100 Forest is kind of way out, almost in the boondocks, surrounded by surface parking lots. So I find this immensely helpful to try to see in my mind's eye what redevelopment might look like. I think that's enough for now.
And this, Commissioner, this also does the senior living facility
Behind the two, right.
there, so it's not necessarily completely out in the middle.
Oh, no, it isn't, as you go towards downtown, right.
As you go towards downtown.
And that's actually a point I was about to make, and it probably should have been raised earlier, is that while that reflects what the downtown looks like, if you really want to get a handle on vistas and proportion and whatnot, the buildings that are outside of that graphic come into play. For example, I'm going to take a little bit of issue with your comment about here, because part of the reason why this is here is not only is it underdeveloped with what's currently there, but you've got Morningside right here, and it's a nice bookends. Without seeing Morningside here, it suggests that, well, why would you develop just this spot here, but the reality is there's already, 5 stories?
Yeah,
Right there. The caveat, though, so what I would say is, and I'll trade you the other catalyst sites to keep that one a catalyst site. Not that I think that means you have to invest redevelopment resources into it, but I think it serves as a flag to those outside of the community as to a high level of interest in redeveloping it. But I think we would have to caveat that there is a historic building there, that they would have to figure out how to relocate that.
As part of the,
Yes.
right. As
I
part
think
of
that needs to be reflected, but
I
have every confidence that can be done. Seen it done.
And to build off your comment, Mayor, I have no interest in seeing that relocated. I think we just have to, it is what it is, it's there for a reason, and I just believe we need to try our best. The people who own it obviously have done a tremendous job of trying to keep it up and keep it usable and keep it modern.
Sure.
And I just want
Or
to.
incorporate it into.
Exactly,
whatever,
but I
or it needs
just,
to be-
I
yes.
don't want to, I don't even want to think about moving it. What I want to think about is protecting it right where it's at. And,
A note to that, that's fine. But I wouldn't want to rule out what is otherwise a corridor that begs for attention.
But with something mightily important sitting right smack dab there on the corner. So it's a dicey thing. What do you put around it that doesn't overshadow it or diminish it?
But that's been done. I mean, you can look at cities across the country where that's been done well.
Understand, but my concern is making sure that it's not being towered over or diminished and, loomed over by whatever else goes around it.
Sure, but I agree. I agree with you. And even if you look across the street, before you get to Morningside, there's much lower buildings before you get to the 5 stories.
I understand.
So having something in the corner that's lower, that doesn't bother me. But once you start going south from there, on that side of the street, up through and even including the bank building, there's a lot of room for improvement.
Don't disagree.
Well, if you were building off of the idea of surface lots and their low value, from the north side of that intersection down through up to the bank is primarily surface lots.
Yes.
Well, obviously, they're right, it's all lot.
It's
Yeah,
basically
it's all
all
lot.
paving lots in some really high rent real estate in terms of potential development.
Right.
Yeah,
And
I'm not
I just
saying
know the neighbors across the street would like to look at something much better.
I wouldn't want to remove that.
No, you're down a ways.
Any kind of list.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Let's leave it on the list, but I think you're right. We have to find a way to somehow safeguard the historic structure that's there.
And that should be noted in I would keep it catalyst, but note that that's something that needs to be addressed appropriately.
Yeah, there needs to be some kind of,
Fine.
something in there that's some text, some squiggly line buffers. I don't know what you want to do, but it needs to be, it's really amazing how well that building has withstood everything that's gone on around it, and to lose it now would just be a shame.
I agree completely.
Despite the fact that we finally got rid of blacksmith shops in the downtown, last zoning code change. So, it was only that,
You can't
wasn't a
actually
couple
run
years
a
ago.
blacksmith shop?
Not anymore, I know, it's disappointing, isn't it?
There's one in downtown Lyle. Why couldn't we have? Before we totally leave Commissioner White's comments, I wanted to ask him, could you just help me paint a picture here of what you see as the difference between contemporary and non-contemporary transit-oriented development?
Well, it just depends. My thought is more along the lines, I didn't want it to imply architectural style. I mean, from a functional point of view, of course, we're looking at transit-oriented development, but functional, and from an architectural style, I don't want to say, oh, this means they want a glass block building. No, and my worry is the word can be misconstrued. The sense that I fear is not what I intended when I wrote the word, but it could be misinterpreted that way, so I want to avoid that possibility.
Great, thank you.
This isn't a modern building, that's.
Agreed. Just wanted to make sure I took it as intended.
I added something else too about windows. Something about
In the left-hand column?
the plate glass windows. Yeah. Just being able to see into downtown businesses is an important part of walkability. If somebody's walking through a downtown region and you can't see into the building, it doesn't create a sense of comfort for the pedestrian, and that reduces the viability of the downtown as a downtown.
Yes, and I agree with you in that even where we have plate glass in a lot of areas, we're getting a lot of non-retail businesses going in, and they're filling up the plate glass with just a big piece of cardboard with a sign on it. And instead it becomes a big giant wall where it was intended to be a window. And I don't know how to balance that, but the wall, just people block out the wall or keep walking or perceive it as there's nothing past the wall, and they don't continue to shop past a certain point when it's mid-block.
I think, as a matter of policy, I generally agree. The problem is, I would rather a less desirable business than a vacant building, although I would definitely prefer retail
Right.
to service.
Right, well, yeah,
So
right,
how you
but-
balance
but
that's
how do
tricky.
if it's a service, if there's people inside and you see them moving around versus the fact that they've thrown something up just inside the window that's 6 feet high and you can't see through, starts to take away some of the warmth. You're getting just coldness, and it's read as just a big giant sign as opposed to what we were going for with plate glass, which was, homey, inviting warmth, come in and talk to us. So, I know, I'm
Well,
sorry.
unless someone wants, I'll grab this as another transition opportunity, because I gave copies to our village manager earlier. Effective tomorrow, I'll give you the advance copy now, I'm going to file 2 new business items. One is for consideration of a downtown design review and to repurpose the ADRB to historic preservation. And it's really, just very briefly, because it's not on the agenda, the proposal is for a committee to consider whether downtown design review is appropriate. So it's not our design to do it, and this is kind of the staff and we'll pass. And then that's something where a lot of these concerns can be hashed out when people assess from pros and cons. So this is not on the agenda, but copies for everybody. It's
Do me a
effective
favor.
tomorrow.
I'll take a PDF. Thank you.
Yeah, save it there. So let's, I can send people PDFs if they want to, or staff can, but that's, so I just want to bring that up, that I'm going to introduce that, I want to talk about this. I have some dates on here, but whatever dates work best as far as the continuing discussion is fine with me, because my contemplated, in the subject of discussion, my current proposal is that we, if we choose to go ahead with an ad hoc design review committee, that they actually start substantive work in September, and that between now and the summer, we figure out how it's going to work. And again, it's not this is not new business to create a design review board. It's to create a committee to discuss whether a design review board is appropriate for Downers Grove, and if so, what parameters it would take.
I'm glad you made that clarification, because I was about to say that's all fine. In fact, I think we've been kicking around those concepts for some time, but they really need to be discussed as part of the broader picture of what our high, I know we have no low priority action items, but our high and medium priority action items, basically the work plan for the remainder of the 2 years. I actually am a fan of both those concepts, but I think we need to look at them as they fit into the overall work plan for everything else that's going on. And doing the work would be one thing. I'll reserve judgment to see whether studying whether the work should be done is any less work. But that's my only caveat, is these are all important things, but as we know every year, we always have 2 or 3 times more important things than we actually have capacity to do, and that we end up having to prioritize, and that's all I will say. I mean, if that turns out to be in the prioritized items, then great. But it just needs to, I'm just reminding everybody to be mindful of, there's probably 9 things we can do, and there's probably 17 things that the 7 of us would come up with as collectively as high priority action.
If you go back to that early question, Mark, I'd like to weigh in again on that. There's the Rogers Street question.
Well, before you do that, hold that thought.
Sure.
Anybody want to revisit this, or are we done with this? We had that discussion, I thought there was consensus. If not, then let's address that.
So I'd like to see that move to transition for the purposes of our planning documents. I don't know what's going to go on there right now, and certainly we can find ourselves in an unfortunately familiar position. But looking at that area, the north side of Rogers, east side of Washington, expectations about that section, I guess I'm concerned with that being downtown edge. I think it should be transition, which I think was the point of the question mark, was whether or not anybody else agreed with that idea.
So Bob, you said you're concerned about its current recommendation?
Yeah, I think it's not dissimilar from what we talked about relative to Highland, you know, the east side of Maine and its effect on Highland. I think it's a similar kind of a condition there. We have an existing development, and I guess I'm not interested in encouraging something that would be downtown edge by definition in that spot.
So before we go any further, Stan, could you just paint a picture for us of where that actually is? I saw some residents had some questions on that Rogers Street, and then remind us of what the current recommendation is, please.
Okay, so this is at the corner of Rogers and Washington. So the Tivoli Theater is here at Highland and Warren. We've got the new 922 here. We've got lots of love at the corner. There's a single-family home. Then there's a camera shop there. And along Rogers, there's a series of single-family homes. A lot of those are now occupied by businesses. There are some rentals interspersed around there. I couldn't tell you which ones are rental, which ones are single-family homes unless there's a sign in there. But they are all two-story sort of older homes with a pitched roof. Across the street, there's an apartment building right in here. I believe that's a 2 or 3 story apartment building. And then there's some single-family homes on Washington here on both sides. There's I believe it's single-family homes. This is Bryan Place, if I remember correctly. So those are primarily single-family homes. Across the street, there's the auto repair shop, a single-family home, and then a duplex at the corner, at the east corner of Rogers and Washington, right there.
And what's the current plan recommendation for that?
Current plan recommendation is edge. So I know in discussions that we've had with the town plan committee, this was, I believe, going to go downtown edge 2, which would be have more green space in the street yard and have buildings not necessarily right up to the front, because the plan was for these edge areas that were closer to the core to have more of a downtown feel where the buildings are right up to the sidewalk and the sidewalk's wider so people can walk. But closer around these areas near the transition areas, there's going to be a call for more green space for increased setbacks.
Building height?
I can't remember off the top of my head.
This was, if I recall, this was
that was really
5 stories.
The driver for me was building height. It was a form thing rather than a function thing. Because whether they were set back or not, with the 922 that's there now, you're only talking about a maximum of 150, 125 feet probably. It's pretty short. Back at 922 to the curb on Rogers.
Yes.
So whatever setback you might try and accomplish is going to be pretty minimal. The issue for me was the idea of 5 stories in there.
See, this is where Edge 1 and Edge 2 could help solve some problems, because if we're looking at one uniform edge, I'd agree, it should be transition. And I'm thinking that thought
makes sense.
the thing I thought applies potentially to the northwest corner of Washington and Maple as well. That the full total maximum height edge region may not be appropriate for that corner, but also we're not talking 1 or 2 stories either.
Sure.
So let me just clarify what's going on. We introduced a new concept of, adding an edge 1, edge 2. When the council gave the comprehensive plan committee and the plan commission direction at the planning level, they said this area that Stan just described in that yellowish color would be edge. But the direction you gave us was the closer that edge is to the middle of downtown, the more urban it feels. The farther away from the middle of downtown, the less urban it feels. The comprehensive plan committee and the plan commission will soon take this up, started moving into the zoning aspects. And when they heard the plan called for a transition from urban to less urban, they are proposing zoning districts, edge 1 and edge 2. So we kind of conflated zoning and planning there for a minute. I want to make sure everybody understood what just happened there. But the planning idea is closer in, more urban, further away, less urban.
It was for the purposes of this document that I was concerned about what we were saying we envisioned or would encourage.
I think there may be several locations where whether it should be edge or transition isn't obvious. And those are locations where edge 2 make the most sense. because it's basically a compromise between max height edge and transition.
It's really a blending tool.
Because that
Trying to blend the line so that it best fits, and the problem is the line's not the same. Circumnavigate the downtown.
I have no problem considering the matter closed as far as, the Main Street Forest area as being edge. Whether the Main Street frontage should be edge 1 or edge 2 is then a later zoning decision, because...
Yep.
You haven't seen all the other stuff that goes with it.
Yep.
So we haven't-
That's a third location where edge 2 might be a solution. I have no problem putting the comprehensive plan calling it edge. So go ahead, but then it should whether it should be edge 2 rather than edge 1 when we do the zoning. I think actually that would be really good that as far as the next step in the process, we identify those areas which may be edge, which are iffy, and those become edge 2.
Yeah, depending on the contours of what exactly edge 2 looks like, that would be okay. But excuse me, but I have the same concern about, what exactly are we putting there and what is the size and scale of it? Even the 920, what's the height on 922?
It's 1, 2, 3 stories with a roof deck, so probably about 40 or so.
Okay.
But then the parapet extends a lot higher, so we measure height on to the flat part of the roof, but then the parapet can extend as high as it wants.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I share the same concerns in terms of, the size and scope of what's going to go there. And if Edge 2 is the tool to get us to what we're looking for, I'm fine with that. But I do have some concern on listing that as Edge.
Maybe we could get a little more specific direction if you think 5 is too big.
I think 5's too big.
I think 5's too
I'll
big
put
as
that.
well.
And so 3?
That's
Yeah,
where I'm.
the
Three with the
transition.
Roof deck?
I mean, that's what I think we're trying to get at with the
Yeah.
edge 2 concept
Yeah.
anyway.
Exactly.
So to say it, I don't know, that's fine with me.
Yeah, I'm fine with 3.
But things like roof decks, fine.
That should be encouraged.
Yes.
The transition was anticipated at a height of 35 feet, which is all the height for our residential zoning districts.
Because I think that's too big of a step down to go, basically a tall house. That's too big of a step down.
Right.
Same thing with the northwest corner of Maple and Washington, 35 feet would be too big of a step down.
So that's all heads
Architectural.
nod when
Yes.
somebody said 3, right? Still all heads nod? Mr. Rollback? There it is. Okay.
I see no dissenters.
Excellent.
Yet.
People have short memories.
I said what?
I said,
Don't go there, Commissioner.
I had another thought on the catalyst sites. Should we be talking about trying to add the site between the Tivoli and 922? The space in there?
Right here?
Between the Tivoli building itself and 922?
Oh, there's that little building with,
There's kind of two buildings there.
Yeah, there's a house and
Yeah, there's a
Connection to
house
the
and
parking
there's-
lot on Rogers.
Wenzel Select is right now,
Right.
which is leaving there anyway.
And there's a parking lot in front.
Expressions, I think, is the other thing that's in.
But that's another, there's a surface lot
In front.
in front. And
you know,
not a lot of usable space. I mean, we're
Gallery's choice.
pretty careful, we're talking about other people's property this way, but in the idea of what would you plan if you were planning, if you had a blank piece of paper, I don't think we want any of that usage there from a space utilization standpoint.
Yeah, parking lots in front of buildings is not consistent with the vision we're looking at for downtown.
Correct.
yes.
Clearly, I think a question for Stan, is there a minimal sort of size before something truly can become catalyst? Is it big enough?
You could just make it a
I don't think there's,
Not
I
be one
don't think there's
project.
any, I don't think there's any limitation on that. I mean, the parking lot by the post office is a catalyst site, and so I think we could classify that as a catalyst site. I think that some of the difficulty is gonna, in practicality, is the grading change from Warren to Rogers. There's a change there, because if you go back on Rogers and look at the new 922, there, it actually reads 4 stories because of the wall. So that's the biggest thing.
Well, yeah, and as a practical matter, once you put a catalyst site out, you've raised the flag. If somebody thinks that they want to expand it and add another parcel because they can do something, they'll do it.
Yeah.
I don't think that we need to assume that a catalyst site will all be developed by one developer either.
Correct.
So-
And also,
so-
the catalyst site is limited to the crayon that we draw on the map.
Oh, yeah. So we don't need a new number. Right. So you just enlarge B2, and we don't need a new number. UB2. It's really a band.
It's the robot in the next Star Wars movie.
Okay. Everybody agree with that concept?
Yes. All right, what else?
Can I go off of downtown, so just a laundry list of a few small comp plan things?
Yes, but before you do.
When you're ready.
Before you do, while we're on that topic, I'll ask for questions or comments from the audience. in the
Yes,
town
good point.
Before we go off into other parts of town. Okay, thank you.
Okay, two hopefully two very, very quick points. I don't know if you have it, can show it up or not, maybe you can visualize it. On the 75th Street potential, the Grove potential development, the apartment building apparently is causing great consternation with many people. And either somehow fixing that drawing or taking the apartment, because people look at the pictures, they don't read the text, they jump to conclusions based on the pictures. I've been told that there's a rumor all throughout the Grove that the plan is to demolish the entire center and build 10,000 apartments or something, which is totally not true, but it's...
Yeah, it was like 25,000.
Yes, totally.
So is that reach 131?
Yes, and I have a tendency to be very blunt, it's right on top of Ashiana. So the consequence, changing the picture might be prudent.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I think what happens in some cases is we put in a graphic that helps people visualize what could be to promote an idea, and I think this particular one is actually working against that stated purpose because it's creating too much concern. If you actually read the text that appears below it, it's crystal clear. So staff has no objection to simply removing the graphic from the document.
Yeah, 60, another is kind of a similar problem. And okay, and my other comment is, I submitted comments about the economic development chapter. We have so much on our plate, I have no problem just deleting the economic development chapter. The old one didn't really have one, and we can talk about it in another context. We don't have to worry about it.
And Commissioner, you and I talked about one of the major reasons for that is the EDC, one of our partners, strong partners, they have a complete strategic plan that's much more detailed than we could ever go into in a comprehensive planning document.
Let's take it out.
Done.
And those two drawings or renderings, I hate to eliminate them. I understand the concern, and maybe there's some way to...
Like, put them somewhere else so they're not sitting on top of it.
The point, I think we want to somehow be pretty strong about the point, which is that we see likely a long-term, pretty dramatic change in the way that parcel's configured and used. I think we really mean that. And there's all evidence from outside of Downers Grove to suggest that we ought to be thinking about that. And so to say to people, sure, that too. But to say to people, whether they're residents or potential partner developers or potential new residents or whomever, that in our planning, we see, we see a lot more than a new facade on that building 20 years from now.
So one technique I've seen is really twofold, is to have multiple images that are clearly labeled what if or could be, so that people don't think it's an actual plan. It clearly jumps, oh. And the other thing is actually to use less technology and to make it look a little more rustic or rough. Because one thing with the advancement of rendering technology, all of a sudden it looks like somebody spent hours and hours. It's really not what happened.
Minecraft.
So there's an architect nodding, going, yeah, that's exactly right. So if we did both of those things, we could actually show you a couple of sort of sketchier and what if, and multiple graphics might be a way to go.
And you could also just replace the apartment building with a banquet hall.
That was going to be my suggestion.
And
we could just take out those apartments and just put a
banquet hall.
Keep the banquet hall there.
And then leave the text that there's a possibility that, depending on how it's relocated, maybe some residential might maybe potentially be squeezed in.
Right, so we had some work to do in this area.
In the text. But it wouldn't be hard to change the picture, I don't think.
No.
That's it. Otherwise, I'm good. So we're talking about adoption.
Sure. Questions or comments on any of the items that Commissioner White just brought up or anything else in the comp plan?
I think, Commissioner Wallace, you've heard the same rumors?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
And it is a proven scientific fact that the only thing known to science that moves faster than the speed of light is a rumor in the village of Downers Grove. I think Argonne has established that as a fact.
It's like a particle.
Yes. Questions on any of those remaining exhibits from anyone in the audience?
I
Please.
just want to make a comment, thank you for the comments protecting the former blacksmith building. I think it's nice that we keep it there and respect it, and so thank you for agreeing to that.
Sure. Thank you. Okay.
We have clear direction. Thank you very much, council.
All right, great. Thank you.
Wait, we were supposed to give you fuzzy direction. That's what we
That's not the grainy direction. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for sticking around. Good night.
For the second,